Ignacio Vega appears on screen in long shot on a hotel bed, resting and thinking. The narrator again says, "We find him in summer 1984 at Hotel Paradise in Valparaiso, registered under an alias. After 3 days, he met his contact, who asked him to reconstruct the network lost 10 years ago. All night, he vainly grapples to remember a single stanza, a line from Life is a Dream. After an endless night, he decides to give up and go to the movies instead, to the theater of his childhood, at the risk of meeting old foes." End of quote. As Ruizs has pointed out, the mnemonic employed by Vega is the classical technique of artificial memory. And I quote what Ruizs said, "It is a film about the art of memory, classical memory. I was very fascinated by a book by Francis Yates called The Art of Memory, and I started reading a lot around the idea of the art of memory in the 17th century. End of quote. Yates' study traces the method of artificial memory from its sources in oratory of antiquity through the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. This method of memorizing hinges on visual imagination rather than language. The text to be remembered is attached to specific images deployed in an imaginary building, the so-called memory palace. Once deposited in a spatial order, memory can later be recovered by mentally visiting the images in turn and collecting their deposits. The classical arts of artificial memory enabled European cultures before print technology to store vast amounts of knowledge. Vega, in turn, appropriates this art of memory for his contemporary Chilean situation of clandestine communication under the dictatorship. You can't write stuff down, so you just gotta put it in your head. Using Calderon's play as a mnemonic device to encrypt the dissident network. Quote, "Each line of the play hid a militant's name, each metaphor an address, and each stanza a military operation." I know this is very complicated, but the local cinema Vega goes to for distraction in 1984 is showing the same movies as 20 years ago. It turns out that the films screened are all North American B movies, Flash Gordon, Captain Marvel, kind of stuff of movies we saw when he was a child. By way of a marvelous breakthrough, Vega suddenly recuperates his lost memory of Calderon's play and of the militant network. The narrator announces this event by omniscient commentary. He suddenly remembers the opening of the drama Life is a Dream, linked with images of a pre-war British thriller. End of quote. Simultaneously, the camera cuts to an extended scene from the thriller, set in a dimly lit train compartment. Alternating shots show a man and a woman seated with their eyes closed. These are the external images of the film screened in the theater. Okay, so the stuff that Vega is actually watching as everybody else is watching in the cinema, witnessed by Vega. Sound over then switches to a female voice beginning to recite Rosaura's opening soliloquy from Calderon's play, as adapted by Ruizs with horrible English subtitles, and I'm just going to cite his subtitles here. "Violent hippogriff, vying with the wind, how can you ray without flame, bird without hue, fish without scales, beast without instinct, race, caper, gallop, stay, be fated to the beast on that mountain," and so on, it goes on. Unlike the narrator's extra-diegetic commentary, this sound over is in strictly internal or subjective. It is coming from Vega's reignited memory. We are hearing the lines of Calderon's play that surge in Vega's memory as he is watching the British thriller. To portray this momentous event of Vega's reawakening memory, Ruizs is using unmatched, non-synchronous sound and visuals. While the images are external and derived from the movie then screening and watched by Vega, the sound is internal and derives from Vega's inner consciousness. Things get even more intricate. Of course, as we as viewers see both at the same. We see the visuals, which are external, and the sound. You hear the sound that's internal, but we don't know. I mean, that's how the film is so difficult to figure out. Things get even more intricate as Rosaura's soliloquy continues. Extraneous images are intercut with the external images of the thriller. A close-up of gloved hand appears, which, as later is revealed later, belongs to Rosaura. The pressure of Vega's internal imaginary reality increases, displacing external images and sounds. Thus, as Vega's memory begins to unravel, Ruizs begins to screen two parallel films in one film. Okay, if that's not Baroque, I don't know what is Baroque, but this is really Baroque. The external plot of events following Vega's return to Chile, what happens, he finally gets killed at the end, as well as the internal film, as it were, that has started to run in the theater or the cinema of his own head, okay, which is the Calderon play. So the whole Calderon sequences you see in the movie are all playing inside his head, and nobody else can see it, who's in the fictional world of the film, except for the audience. We see it too, but we have to know that one is fiction, imaginary, and the other one is real. Non-synchronous sound and images are anti-realist cinematic devices that signal the splitting of Vega's consciousness between external reality and internal reality, present and past, the returning exile's reality in 1985 and the re-emerging memory lost in 1974. Back at his hotel room, Vega realizes that to reconstruct the play, he must go to the cinema every day. The remainder of the film traces Vega's recovery of Calderon's play scene by scene, act by act, in shots intercut with shots from the external plot of Vega's tightening entrapment in the conspiracy plotted by his false Chilean friends. Yet, as one critic asked, why doesn't Vega simply read the text of Calderon's play, Life is a Dream? It's always available. You just go to the library. He doesn't go to the library to remember the network, right? Mm-hmm. But the text won't do, and it doesn't. That's not an option. And Ruiz's point is that Calderon's play is no longer archived as script in Vega's head, but rather as a visual sequence of scenes, as in a film. It's visually archived. It's not textually archived. Otherwise put, the method of artificial memory used by Vega, Yeats's memory palace, is image-based, like a film, rather than text-based, like Ruiz's literary source. The paradigm shift from textual to visual narrative is crucial, and for the textual continuity of the printed play is shattered and replaced by the new spatial and visual order of artificial memory, which corresponds to the visual logic of cinema, the disjunctive and combinatory process of montage. And I'm just waiting for the time. Deleuze is dead now, but if Deleuze had discovered this film, he would have written a book about it, or Ruizs. I mean, it would be perfect cineast for Deleuze. Okay. Okay, so much for the third proposition. One more, fourth proposition, in conclusion. Ruiz's and Bembergs' films displayed, each in their own idiosyncratic ways, a neo-Baroque aesthetic in cinema, comprising hyper-realist mise-en-scène, extravagant cinematography, and discontinuous or theatrically visible editing. And so that's my theory about what neo-Baroque film is. I'm sure Angela will have a lot to say to that. The neo-Baroque sensibility in film maximizes, in other words, all registers of cinema. It's basically upping the ante on everything that cinema has to offer. Both the realism of the mise-en-scène, what is staged before the camera, including setting, lighting, costume, and figure behavior, and anti-realist features resulting from techniques of cinematography and editing that flaunt the artificiality of a medium. And here's the explanation. Ruizs has formalized his neo-Baroque poetics in two cinematic manifestos, which are really interesting, Poetics of Cinema 1 and 2. I want to close with an outline of his argument. Poetics of Cinema 1 is organized around a polemical critique of what Ruizs cryptically refers to, so quote-unquote central conflict theory, whose actual target is the continuity system of editing perfected by classical Hollywood cinema. So he hates Hollywood cinema. In other words, well, he loves it too. The B movies he likes, but official Hollywood cinema he hates. And